Tudor Dynasty fascinates many of us. Stories about its kings, queens, and famous people of the time fill books, films, and television series. And, of course, the dynasty had strong Welsh roots. The family was long known as the Tudors of Penmynydd in Anglesey. They were fairly well-off landowners, and the story of how one of them came to sit on the throne of England as King Henry VII begins with his grandfather.
He was Owen ap Tudor, more commonly known today as Owen Tudor. Owen was a soldier who, in a quite extraordinary life, became the secret husband of an ex-queen. He lived a privileged life, but died a violent death.
Owen was descended from prominent people in Welsh history, including Rhys ap Gruffydd, the Lord Rhys, and Ednyfed Vychan, who served Prince Llewellyn the Great. It's said that Ednyfed cut off the heads of 3 Englishmen in a battle, hence the design on his coat of arms. Owen was born in 1400 to Meredydd ap Tudor and Margaret, the daughter of the Lord of Anglesey. Meredydd had administrative roles in Anglesey, which he lost when he rebelled after Henry Bolingbroke overthrew King Richard II in 1399. The following year he joined the rebellion of his cousin, Owain Glyndwr. He was pardoned, but later rebelled again, and his lands were confiscated. Little is known about him thereafter. One story has it that he fled to Snowdonia to hide out after a murder, and soon died.
Not much is known about Owen's early life. Details are sparse and some of those are contradictory, but it seems likely that he was taken under the wing of an English lord and became a squire, that is, a kind of young assistant to a knight.
It's likely that he served with King Henry V's forces at the Battle of Agincourt in 1415. However, the story is complicated by contemporary references to people with similar names who may or may not have been Owen. King Henry V was married in 1420 to Catherine de Valois. She was the daughter of the French King Charles VI, thereby giving Henry a future claim to the French throne. But 2 years later, Henry died. His son became the child king, Henry VI. It's known that Owen entered the service of the Lancastrian Sir Walter Hungerford, who had responsibility for managing the household of the infant king. Owen was an outsider, a Welsh-speaking foreigner in the eyes of the English, but he had obviously earned trust. He became keeper of the Queen's wardrobe at Windsor Castle, a more responsible job than it may sound. Catherine was in her early 20s around this time. A possible marriage to Edmund Beaufort, the 2nd Duke of Somerset, was strongly opposed by her brother-in-law, Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester. To prevent it, a law was passed that, should a dowager queen marry without the consent of the king, the new husband would forfeit all his lands and possessions. The catch for Catherine was that the king could only give consent when he reached the age of 16, but at that time he was only 6 years old.
So there was no marriage to Edmund, but a relationship developed between Catherine and Owen. There are various stories about how she fell for him, such as that she saw him swimming in a river and was smitten. Another has it that there was a dance and he tripped and fell into her lap. Whatever it was, she was taking quite a risk because this was a scandalous relationship. So far apart were they on the social scale. Catherine was attractive and vivacious, and by all accounts, Owen was intelligent, charming, and very handsome. The two married, which, under the circumstances, was kept secret at least from the public at large. So the question is, why did Catherine marry a man of such inferior social status? It's been suggested that she was laughing at the law by marrying a man who had nothing to lose anyway, but as things were to develop, it looks as though it was a genuine love match.
When she became pregnant and had a child, the relationship became common knowledge, or inside circles anyway. More children followed. They had at least 4, some say even 6. The situation seems to have been accepted, as Owain was given the rights of an Englishman, certain citizen benefits that King Henry IV had denied Welsh people in racist laws. However, there were still limits on what Owain was allowed to do, and at this time, Owain's name became anglicised. Owain ap Peredydd ap Tudor became known as Owen Tudor. The validity of the marriage has been questioned, but although the Yorkist King Richard III had alleged illegitimacy in the Tudor line, he didn't question this marriage. It also seems unlikely that the Church of the day would have put up with them being unmarried. Catherine died in her late 30s in 1437, soon after childbirth. It seems that she had suffered a lingering illness. She was buried in Westminster Abbey, where her funeral effigy can still be seen today. And as a gruesome aside, after her tomb was disturbed in the Abbey, her body lay exposed to the public for 400 years. The diarist Samuel Pepys saw Catherine's remains and recorded the following. I had the upper part of her body in my hands, and I did kiss her mouth, reflecting upon it that I did kiss a queen, and that this was my birthday, 36 years old, that I did first kiss a queen.
With her gone, Owen was vulnerable to his enemies, principally the Duke of Gloucester. He gathered some things and quickly tried to make his way to Anglesey. He got about 70 miles or so when he was intercepted and told the Regency Council had demanded he return to London. He took some persuading, but back he went.
He was charged with violating the Queen Dowager marriage law, and he was jailed at the utterly squalid Newgate prison. He escaped twice, perhaps with help, because he was not without supporters, but each time he was recaptured. However, a while later he was pardoned by the young King Henry, who by now was legally an adult. Thereafter, Owain became a loyal servant of the king. He served on campaigns in France and was made captain of the castle at Regneville-sur-Mer in Normandy. But the French were gradually winning. Soon, Owen and his small garrison were under siege, and after 6 days a surrender was negotiated, allowing Owen and his men to take a ship back to England. But his life still seemed secure. He was given a pension and lucrative posts. He was quite wealthy, and he had a mistress at Pembroke by whom he had a son, David.
King Henry took a keen interest in the upbringing of Owen's 2 oldest sons, Edmund and Jasper. They were, after all, his half-brothers. He knighted both of them once they had reached the age of 18, and soon after, Edmund he made the Earl of Richmond, and Jasper became the Earl of Pembroke. These really were Premier League titles with much land and income. The king also must have knighted Owen at some time, but there is no absolute certainty because no record exists.
As the 100 Years' War with France came to an end, the 37 years of what we now call the Wars of the Roses were about to begin. King Henry suffered long bouts of mental illness. Richard, Duke of York, became protector to rule temporarily, and he proved himself very efficient. The Tudors seemed to have been on good terms with him, but when war came, they stuck with their blood relative, King Henry. Owen was with Jasper at the successful siege of Denby in 1460. The following year, at the age of 60, he was with Jasper, who led the Lancastrian forces that met the Yorkist army at the Battle of Mortimer's Cross. At dawn on the day of that battle, there was an atmospheric phenomenon known as a parhelion. 3 suns seemed to appear in the sky. The Yorkist, Edward Earl of March, later King Edward IV, motivated his troops by saying that this was a sign that God was on their side. The Lancastrians, largely inexperienced men, tired after a long march, were defeated. Jasper escaped, but Owen was captured. Some reports stated that, because of his royal connections, he did not expect to be killed, but he was beheaded, along with others, in Hereford. Allegedly, his last words were, "The head that was wont to lie in Catherine's lap would now lie in the executioner's basket." His head was put on display in the market square.
An account from the time states that a woman washed the blood from Owen's face. She combed his hair and surrounded his head with candles. But who she was and why she did it, we will never know.
Some years earlier, his son Edmund Tudor had married Lady Margaret Beaufort. Edmund died shortly before his son was born, when Margaret was just 13. Later, this very able and ambitious woman worked tirelessly to ensure that the boy would one day ascend the throne as Henry VII. Jasper was the young Prince Henry's guardian and mentor when they fled to France for safety. Between them, Margaret and Jasper plotted and prepared. After 14 years in exile, Henry and Jasper landed with a force in Pembrokeshire. They were assisted by Sir Rhys ap Thomas of Llandilo. Henry gathered Welsh supporters as he marched to his victorious battle at Bosworth Field on the 22nd of August, 1485.
The Tudor dynasty was born that day, but it would not have happened had it not been for an unlikely love match between an ex-queen and her Welsh secret husband.